mention it was in the minus degrees here in Australia. So sorry, chaps.
Dude.
Oh, no.
Okay, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's nice out.
Wait, minus Fahrenheit or minus Celsius? That matters.
Celsius, yeah, I should,
no.
yeah. It's slightly different metrics over here.
Cool and temperate, I bet.
Yeah. It's currently 9 degrees Celsius outside, so I'm not sure what the Fahrenheit equivalent is of that, but yeah, it's a wee bit chilly, as they say.
That's pretty chilly. You said you're in Australia?
Yes, yeah.
I've heard a lot of spiders from one of my friends in Australia, so that's the one I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. I was facing off against one of those bastards yesterday. He crawled into my room somehow, and I sprayed him with some bug spray, and because he was kind of like still moving around on the floor, I was like, what do I do? So I sucked him up with my Dyson vacuum cleaner. And so that was the end of that story. Who knows where that spider is now? Swirling around in a vortex somewhere.
Gentlemen, I propose that this is how we open.
I approve. Let's do this.
Welcome to Warthog Radio episode 8.
With some out-of-pocket stories.
So how big is the spiders in Australia? Tell me.
Yeah, tell us about the spiders, Andrew.
Well, I mean, there's lots of them, isn't there? I mean, it's almost the ones that are bigger that aren't that bad as opposed to the smaller ones. Because you've got the big boys like the huntsmans, which are the big kind of furry, like dark brown grey ones. And they don't normally bite. They usually just kind of get referred to as house spiders.
How big are they? I think we got huntsmans here.
I mean, the biggest I've seen has been about the size of my hand.
The size of your hand? Okay, never mind. We don't have ones that big.
No,
they're big boys, and mind you, I play a lot of piano.
It's like tarantula.
Yeah. They're quite big lads. But then you've got smaller ones called redback spiders. I think they call them black widows in the States, and they've got like a strip of red along like the back of them, along their abdomen. They're the scary ones. They're quite nasty, and that they will actually fake being dead, which is slightly terrifying. Yeah, no, like legitimate. I have a full story here where I was going through when I was still living in my parents' place, and they had like this sort of outdoor furniture setting, and I was washing it down because I was having some mates over. And there was this little redback spider that was chilling under the chairs. And I thought, okay, well, I can wash him out, or I'll spray him first. So I sprayed him with the bug spray, and like he kind of fell out and onto the pavement, and like faked being dead, like how spiders do that thing where they kind of crumple together, and their legs kind of tuck in. And so I went away for a minute to go grab the hose, and I came back, and bro was running away. Like he just got back up again and started running away. So
the coast is clear.
Yeah, legitimately. It was really scary. So you gotta do a double take with those guys. But yeah, so if you ever do come to Australia, my advice is bring a can of Raid or Mortein with you, or buy one as one of the first things you do. At the airport or something, because they do be spidering. I do just want to preface, like, it's not like you're stepping into 343 Guilty Spark and there's a bunch of flood spiders everywhere. Like, it's not that bad, but it's they tend to congregate around certain homes at certain times of years, and they're just annoying, but we live with it. Anyway, enough of my personal anecdotes about 8-legged freaks. Kaleb, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Warthog Radio.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, dude. Why don't you describe who you are?
Sure. Hello, my name is Kaleb Nekumanesh. I am a level designer and environment artist. I've worked on many games, one of which was Halo Infinite, but I've also worked on other ones, including New World and Immortals of Avium and Orcs Must Die Death Trap. I'm currently working at Super Genius as a lead environment artist, and I cannot say on which title, but that's what I currently do.
New World, that's the Amazon MMO.
Yeah, it's currently called New World Eternum, but that is the Amazon one.
That's still going on.
Yeah, I mean, I personally enjoy it. I know that there's a lot of people who have different mixed feelings about it. I won't go too much into that, but I mean, in terms of my opinion, I just enjoy relaxing games, especially at times where like I could really use some relaxation, and I like to think of New World as doing kind of repetitive things, and I guess that soothes me. I don't know what that says about me, but
I think my wife described it as the game where you can become a level 99 wood chopper. Like, that's the kind of game it is, where you just relax and do something.
Yeah, I had some really stressful days, and just watching, just chopping some trees could be just as relaxing as whatever else people do to relax. Which really sucked, because I actually, it's one of my first bugs that I know that I introduced. I remember I was working on the game, and I remember that I was just fixing collision on the trees, because the trees have different LODs. And for those that don't know, as you get further away from assets, they drop in quality, and all of them have different collisions. So if a player chops them down, they need to be able to behave realistically. And I remember I accidentally put on one of the trees, I put the collision accidentally like 500 units away from where it should have been. So somebody on Reddit posted a thing saying "Be free, mature tree," and they chopped down a tree, and it would go rocketing up into space. And I remember my boss coming and was like, "So you're going to need to stop what you're doing today and fix this." And I was like, "Oh no!" That was a fun one. And I was thankful that because there's other types of bugs that are a little bit more like it actually hurts to see. Like if you break the game for a large amount of people to the point where it like ruins the experience, it hurts a little bit inside to see it out in the wild. But I was thankful that this was like the first public one that I know about, and it was like just something fun. It's just something where people were memeing on it, and I think somebody even left a comment saying that they should introduce quests to make it like a quest for you to go free a bunch of trees. You chop it down, and instead of falling down, they go rocket into space.
Send them back to the moon or wherever.
Yeah, I enjoyed that a lot.
That reminds me of Tears of the Kingdom, how some of the trees in that game, because it's like open world and there's trees everywhere, so like trees become a very mundane sight. But at some point during the game, there is an enemy type that uses trees as disguises. So you'll just be like walking around, and then you turn around and just one of the trees has uprooted itself and is now running at you.
Oh no,
God, that sounds terrifying.
Imagine like Halo Infinite, like all of those pine trees everywhere. If one of them just hauled ass after you when your back is turned, you just see the little red on your motion tracker approaching.
God, I'm just going to put it out here. That would make for an awesome Forge mode. Someone's got to do that.
That's the type of game design I really miss. Like, that's the thing I miss. I really miss the idea of, like, having just some wacky side quest or some wacky side thing that you just do off the beaten path. Like, they don't do that too much anymore. Sometimes games take themselves too seriously, and it's kind of sad.
Games kind of, like, follow... I feel like it's almost like the sad thing, like, as gaming has become more of a concrete, established art medium with well-defined rules, like the Wild West of game development is like over, and so you see less weird stuff.
Yeah, I think it probably costs too much money. It takes too many resources, and a small joke that would probably take one person a day to do is all of a sudden like a multi-thousand, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands joke that requires like 10 different teams to work collaboratively over it.
Yeah, I think we're very far from that era of gaming where, like, a handful of people can come together to, do a random side mode that pops up after you complete the campaign, a la COD Zombies from the World at War game, which, people managed to do with just a few sort of assets and some funky animations that got left behind. But I guess there is still some sort of exploration that people are able to do in indie games. But in terms of the AAA scene, seems a lot harder these days.
Have you ever heard the story about in Call of Duty? Not to go off on a tangent. For Call of Duty Zombies, the iconic ray gun, it was donated to the small group that were making the Zombies mode by Max Porter, who was one of the artists at Treyarch, and I guess like that little ray gun was a personal pet project of his to keep himself sane. Because when you're working on like a World War II military shooter, there's only so many times you can model an MP40 or an STG.
Yeah.
And so that little ray gun was a project he had, and they were like, we need something. We need something to throw into this mystery box that we're developing that spits out random guns that you can use against the zombies. And he was like, I've got this ray gun thing I'm making. You guys want it? And
honestly, that
that's-
sounds inspiring.
And now if you load up Black Ops 6, you can see microtransaction skins for your personal ray gun.
I wonder if Mr. Porter's making any residuals off that.
I doubt it. that oh, do you enjoy?
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, not
Do you
with
enjoy
Activision.
unlocking, opening a box and seeing a microtransaction? Man, that looks like fun.
Yeah, not particularly. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like instances like that, I guess, like in Halo, just like weird little skunk works type stuff that accidentally became the most iconic aspects of the Halo games. Do you guys know any off the top of your head?
For some reason, I'm thinking of the like the floating sprite in Halo 3, the snow mission, where if you go off path and you jump on some of the Forerunner architecture, you see one of the employees floating there. I don't remember who it was.
I think, was it Jason Jones, and he's like got a shower cap on?
Probably.
Yeah, he's like got his top off or something, and he's just kind of standing there in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few sort of random ones of those. Yeah,
I don't know if that
like some low quality gifs.
Yeah, I don't know if that turned iconic though. Like it's. I think Halo Infinite tried to do something with a sandwich, like a mystical sandwich or something like that.
Yeah, underneath the map, there's like a hidden cave thing, and there's a couple of those dead grunt assets, but they're like propped up, and so they all kind of look like they're frozen in like reverence or like worship, and the golden sandwich is on like an altar of rocks.
Yeah, I remember that. Can't think of how that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head though that went like really, as you said about the ray gun, where it like became iconic to the franchise. Unless it is, maybe the sandwich is iconic to the Halo franchise. I don't know, but
I think it's safe to say that golden sandwich is not iconic to Halo. Okay, so as like a level designer, what are your favorite Halo games?
My favorite Halo game has always been like Halo 1, but I've never really thought that it was the best design game. It was like the jumping off point for the rest of the franchise. I really enjoyed it because it had a special place in my heart. I think I was telling you guys before that I was gifted an Xbox from one of my friends who passed away, and it basically came with Lego Star Wars. It came with Republic Commando, which was a Star Wars game as well, and Halo. And I immediately went to the Star Wars games because that was what I knew when I was a kid, and I enjoyed Star Wars. And then Halo was the last one that I went to because I didn't know what it was, and it was just a really great experience from beginning to end. I enjoyed it. I was mysticized by it. I didn't understand any of it. It all kind of went.
Paralyzed
Maybe Oh yes, nice reference there.
We love the Halo references here.
In case you couldn't tell.
No, but honestly, like that, I never really thought that it was like the best experience. It was just the most special, to me, as it was for many other people. And I think from a design perspective and just my personal favorites has to be Halo 3 and Halo 3 ODST. And part of that is because Halo 3 ODST was the one and only. Sadly, I was born too late to experience more of these, but like it was the only one that I was able to go to a midnight release for. I remember very vividly that, and I kind of wished I could have experienced more of those. Sadly, those are like long gone nowadays, but the missions, they felt unique, they felt self-contained, they were fun with friends, they were perfectly designed, they fulfilled the player fantasy, they were fun, they were action-packed, and there was a lot of varied content. I've never really been very knowledgeable about Halo's story. Sorry for all the really awesome Halo fans out there that enjoy the story and know a lot about it. I wouldn't count me as one of those people. I just enjoy the story, but don't know a lot else about it. But other than, that side of it, I just really enjoyed the missions. They was varied. They were fun. They were well designed.
Yeah. That's an interesting point that you brought up, that I think a lot of people assume that video game developers know every aspect about the video game that they're working on. Like if you're a Halo campaign level designer, you must be super deep into the campaigns. You know all the lore, you've read all the books.
Yeah.
That's not always like realistic for like a massive studio full of hundreds and hundreds of employees, that every single one is a huge mega fan.
I mean, I think that it's the job, when you have certain jobs, it's your job to know certain things, right? Whatever it is that it may be, as a level designer, it's important to study different Halo levels. I think that's your responsibility as a level designer, is to to focus on what came before and how you can evolve it in the future. If you're a narrative designer, you should understand the narrative to a T. And I don't think those go hand in hand. Oftentimes when I was working at 343, we would know that certain things would happen, but then we would toss it to a narrative designer to kind of figure out, okay, what exactly happened? Like, for instance, the first level that I worked on in Halo Infinite was Fortune Squad. It's in the sequence level. They had a lot more meaning back then. I don't really remember exactly what the meaning is currently, but I can kind of explain what it was when I worked on it, which I made like a video about like the design of Squad to kind of showcase like the thought and effort that went into every single POI, because there was a lot of thought. I had about a week to work on that. And for me, it was important to kind of have like a whole story to have a player fantasy that the player would experience. And then two, have the player kind of learn some sort of side story that either was connected to other points of interest or otherwise. So everywhere in the open world, I kind of like to put like little hints of, following the Marines storytelling. Everyone worked on that, but I had my own little side canon for what was actually happening. And one of the Marines groups went to Fortune Squad, and you can find their Warthog just sitting outside of one of the caves there. You go inside the cave, and you see like dead bodies, and it's dark, so you have the flashlight on, and then you get to like the big open cave area where there's a bunch of enemies, but there's also a dead sniper. And I had like this whole internal canon of like, oh, one of the Marines were hiding in here from a banished patrol, but then as they were escaping from this other point of interest, but then they got caught, and the sniper heroically was trying to save them as they escaped up the mountain and sadly died, so you can get a sniper rifle. And then as you go up the mountain, you see a little bit more of storytelling until you get to the top, where you arrive just in time to save them, and feel like a hero. And that's kind of the important thing for me is, the whole idea behind that area was to be like a platforming level before we knew that the grapple shot was something that was going to be more permanent in Halo's design. So, we were thinking, oh, well, maybe you have to jump across a few chasms and such. That changed a little bit. And, the other bit was having the player follow the story, a very small story of Marines. And then at the very end, having the ability to save them felt like a really cool experience. And, it's I think it's the job of the level designer to have that plan, share that plan with everybody through documentation and talking with people, and then just making sure that the rest of the team upholds the original design goals that were approved by management. If the director says okay, then you just kind of stick with it and make sure that it kind of sees itself through to completion. You give everyone, exactly what they need to be successful, and playtest. And of course, throughout development of Halo Infinite, a lot of things changed, and we now have what we have now. But just seeing kind of where that came from and the amount of effort that everybody, not just level designers, but everyone had like their own intent on every bit of that campaign. You can kind of see a little bit of those storytelling beats kind of poke through. And I think that's kind of why I enjoy messing around in the campaign a little bit, because you can kind of, if you know what to look for, those bits of humanity and bits of cool storytelling kind of pop through. But it's really hard to show that in a project that's manned by thousands of people, and you never really get to meet the people who make the final say on stuff. It kind of just goes into the ether. So a little bit of tangent. Sorry about that.
No, that was, there's so much meat on that bone.
Yeah.
That was great.
And I think the thing as well with Halo is that it's got such a long history of like great environmental and like design storytelling. I mean, even going so far back as the first game, where in 343 Guilty Spark, for example, you've got like a dead Marine next to a dead Jackal or something on like top of this crate, which gives off this impression of, oh, they, the human and the Covenant, they were finally fighting together against the Flood because whatever this threat was really that bad. And there's little sprinkles of that throughout the different campaigns and missions and stuff. So yeah, it's good to see that like that's something that's still actively considered. And like making little stories about it, because like undeniably someone's going to play the game and they're going to look at all these little I guess, breadcrumbs that you've left behind, and they might try and piece it together or something. And that's that's how like bigger Easter eggs and theories and everything else starts coming together. So yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, that was definitely something that we thought about too, because it's like, if you find, I mean, the purpose of the dead guy with a sniper rifle is just to get a sniper rifle, right? We could have just left the sniper rifle there and called it a day, but it was, I think, something that we really pushed for as a level design team is to, if we do place something, try to have an intent for it. Why is the sniper rifle there? And, that can't always happen, especially later on in development where things are getting done quicker. You have less ability to do more things because things are getting locked down. Sometimes you have to be a little bit more messy. That's just part of game development. And, I think the goal was to at least, whenever we could, at least tell some sort of story if something's there. And that comes down to even just the environments, thanks to the wonderful work from the environment artists, my role as a level designer, I put a lot of time into like how the ring, what happened after the ring exploded, what interesting level design opportunities can come out of that. What new pathways that didn't exist before can there now be? Maybe what caves existed that weren't there before now are there. I was thinking like, I'm not very scientific, so this might sound very,
that's okay. Neither are we.
But like, how like, geography changes as tectonic plates move. It's kind of something I was thinking about. I was like, okay, well, how can the level design change if something very violent happened very quickly?
A ring quake?
A ring explosion, like, Cortana going boom, like what would actually happen to the ring? What
I guess
things can happen.
That's the scientific way to put it.
It just reminds me of,
exactly.
of Black Ops 3's campaign, Train Go Boom, except, it's Cortana Go Boom.
I remember there's one time, a little bit of a side tangent. To kind of go into what you're saying about like narrative and how we don't know about the narrative stuff. I remember talking to some of the other designers and I was asking how the ring has gravity, because in my brain I thought, the ring has I don't know what the actual narrative is, so I'm sure some lore people will know the
really
correct answer.
Big suction like a giant fan.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so I thought it was centrifugal force. I was like, it's the ring, it makes sense, it's centrifugal force, and that's what a lot of designers agree. Yeah, it just rotates. So I was like, so how does that work if the ring's broken? And then I found out later that I think that the ring gets the sucking force from the nearby gas giant.
Wait, really?
I don't, that's what I was told. I don't really know what the narrative reason was, but I think a narrative person, I talked with them at one point and they were like, that's one of the big reasons why they are next to a gas giant is they get some resources. And part of that is whatever, I don't know, space magic is used to kind of keep gravity working. And who knows, maybe both of those are wrong. I don't know what the correct answer is. I'm probably going to get roasted online for not knowing, but that's kind of the idea that I wanted to show, is that we just don't know. We just leave it to the experts, who are figuring out the story to figure out, okay, how does this going to work in the lore?
Now that I think about it, when you jump off the side of the ring in Halo Infinite, you just kind of fall into space.
Mm-hmm.
Like you accelerate, like the ring is on a planet.
I have a feeling that's just engine stuff. I'm working on a game right now this isn't like a professional game, it's a side project before people think I'm leaking something. I'm working on a game that's based on gravity, and it's enough of a headache to make gravity change. I'm sure something as simple as, something seemingly as simple as changing gravity when something like that happens, I'm sure is different. But like we did do something, I don't remember exactly how we did it, but we do have like around the islands to stop you from getting to an island you're not supposed to get to before you're allowed to. So like it's essentially there's
crazy gravity wells. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's some parts of the open world where you can see like your grappling hook, the little symbol appears on the HUD, which lets you know that you can shoot your grappling hook and it'll connect. Like there's parts of the game where you could do that, but if you try actually zipping across the gap, you just get like sucked into the abyss.
I'll say, like, I tried to. So I worked a lot on the open world side of things. So like the interstitial points, a lot of the terrain and everything you do between the missions. So a lot of my, I really wanted to get to the sequence level because I left 343 like half a year to a year before it launched. And I was like, I want to see what they look like. And I could see it from a distance, but I couldn't get close. So I remember trying to grapple across, and I was like, oh yeah, we stopped you from being able to do that. Dang, okay, I'll play through the game first and then I'll go.
Fine. I'll play the way it was supposed to be played.
I remember losing my settings to like my save, and I had to play through everything again to get like all the pictures and videos for my portfolio. And I was like, oh man, it's not like it's a bad thing, but more so like I wish I had my initial playthrough to make it easier.
Dude, I've played through Halo Infinite's campaign so many times now because at launch, there was no mission select.
Yeah.
Do you remember that, Andrew? If you had to get like footage of AA Gun Island,
Oh yeah.
Pelican Down,
Yep. Had to go through the whole thing.
That was me too. Like, because we played through. I mean, of course, it was in development, so I never really got the chance to play it through entirely all the time. But like, I played through the campaign a lot, but like broken up because, you know, in development builds, you know, not very stable. But you know, I played through a lot, and I was like, I know this campaign inside and out. And then I play at home, you know, trying to get footage and stuff, and it's like, oh man, this is a little bit different, but it's also like, you know, you have to go through the entire experience to get to a certain point, and then like the persistence key is switched off after you complete it, right? So you can't redo content after it's done. I don't know if they ever patched that out with the mission select screen. Maybe you guys might know this more than me, but like, I remember at launch you had to play through the entire campaign over again if you wanted to repeat content, and that made it even harder to get footage and stuff. So that was fun.
Yeah, it was once content was completed, that was it. It was stuck as completed. And so if one of those Marine squads, if you wanted to rescue them, you had to start the campaign over.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. That makes sense. But also it's like, can we just switch it off? Because it's just a simple bull. You could just...
Well, and they've done that now. So now if you open up Halo Infinite's campaign, it's like everything in the open world just says like replay, and it essentially does that. It like reverts it. Now you have to go complete it again, which is awesome.
So that's good. Yeah.
And when I
wanting to play the campaign multiplayer to the co-op, I've never had the opportunity to play the campaign with somebody. Never experienced co-op with
really
Halo Infinite. Yeah, because I remember we were pushing for that during development, but then when it was cut, I was like, all right, well, we don't have it. So like, I mean, I was long gone from 343 before they added it. So one day I'll play through the campaign with 4 players, but I've never had the opportunity yet.
Gentlemen, may I propose one of these days we find a 4th and do a playthrough of the campaign?
Mean, I will say, I will be lagging and glitching all over the shop. 250 ping will be so enjoyable, I'm sure.
It'll be like
they won't be able to hit you.
Development. It'll be like in development Halo Infinite.
It'll just be
sorry, bad joke.
It'll just be a glitching mess.
War Chief, we can't hit him. It's like he's a ghost. He's phasing through solid objects.
I've heard stories.
Bullets, they don't impact him.
God, imagine trying to use the grapple shot and 250 ping. That'd be a fun time. That sounds like that'd be interesting. Always good to get a second perspective as well.
Be super keen for you to physically take us to the locations that you've designed and like walk us through almost like a museum tour.
That'd be fun. I've had to do that again recently. Just kind of play through, or not play through. I didn't play through it, but just going through like playthroughs. That was a big mouthful. Going through playthroughs of it and trying to remember. Honestly, thinking back on decisions that I made. Was it 5 years ago? No, that's when it came out. When did I work there? I worked there 2017, I think. 8 years ago. Thinking back on decisions that were made 8 years ago or more. I don't know. Forgive me, my brain's dead. And trying to remember why I did certain things is like a exploration process for myself as well. I'm going through it and it's like, oh, I remember doing that. Why did I do that? Oh, right, because of this. That was a bad decision, but it worked out. Things like that.
What areas in the open world did you work on, if you don't mind me asking?
Basically, everything that wasn't an outpost or a mission, I touched in some way. And that varies between I worked on it from concept to completion. Sometimes I just helped out a little bit, whether it's helping another designer, do some combat setups or setting up the missions or just figuring out where the missions should take place in the map. I would say a majority of the content in, that wasn't a main mission, I've at least touched in some way. And that's true for all of the level designers who are on the interstitial team. The way that it worked is that we didn't really have much time to spend on any one thing. We were jumping between areas constantly. I would work on something, and if you worked on something from the beginning, you kind of were like the producer. You were the what would you call it? The point of contact. So if anyone wanted to know why you made a certain decision, they would contact you, and you would usually be on the documentation and such. But after I was done working on something, I moved on to the next thing, and I couldn't keep working on it. So, for instance, on Fortune Squad, I worked on it initially, and then once I playtested, I was happy with it. I passed it off to the ether, and then there was so many different designers and artists and visual effects and lighting all touched it, narrative, and then sometimes other designers would kind of come in and kind of make some changes and stuff. So hopefully that's not too much of a long-winded answer of we kind of touched everything as an interstitial team of the open world. It was mostly just kind of every time we played through the open world is what needs changing, and we'd play through the content as much as we could, and we would see where the game needed adjustments.
The long-winded answers are honestly great because we get everybody is pretty freaking awesome in the comment section, the listeners, but every now and then you get the lazy developers. Why didn't they just make game better?
Unfortunately, it's not like a single player game where you could say, hey, this is the level designer working on an open world game. Too many people touch it at too many different times of development. For me, I was only there 18 months, so I have no idea who worked on it after me. And honestly, I may not even know what they actually did, and that's kind of the idea of working on a big team. I really just don't know a lot of that stuff that happened. I couldn't give you a list of everyone who worked on everything that I worked on because it was just too many people, and some people in different countries all over the world, It was a little bit of a back and forth where I would work on something, come back to it later and see that's completely different. It's okay, time to see, play through it again. Did they change it for the better? Most times, yes. Sometimes they might break a certain thing or two. I'll be okay, make a switch, Whereas if you look at a single player game, typically you'd have a level designer work on a certain number of levels, and they would be the sole designer on it. For Halo Infinite in particular, that was a completely different beast. Unlike any other game that I've ever worked on, so many people, so many different departments, and if you wanted to know information, it was very hard to even get it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just had to react.
Halo Infinite, it's got a bit of a reputation, I guess, for the production, to put it lightly. It's kind of amazing that it actually got over the finish line.
Yeah, I think, wasn't the original release date? I think the original release date was 2018, right, or something like that. Just thinking
2020.
If the game released 2020, really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That was it was the same year that Call of Duty Cold War was coming out, so it was the same year Call of Duty Cold War came out. 10 years after Call of Duty Black Ops, the original Black Ops, released alongside Halo Reach, and Halo Infinite, was evoking a lot of memories of Reach. So there were a lot of people saying Call of Duty's back to the Cold War, and like Halo is Spartans look like Reach Spartans again. Like,
I mean, I think that
circular.
I think that that's something that I saw a lot of too, because like I definitely, you know, regardless of how I feel about certain games like Call of Duty or Halo, you know, I mean, playing through them, you could definitely see that they were trying to scratch that itch. You know, they knew Call of Duty knew that Black Ops was something that people loved. They wanted to bring it back. How do they do it? They go back to basics, quote unquote. I remember when they pitched the game to me when I was getting hired, they were like, it's like the silent cartographer, but the whole game's the silent cartographer. And I thought about that, and that's what really, seeing that and the original trailer that they showed me, which was like the first trailer that released, I was like, this is something special. I want to work on this. As I was learning more and more, you know, I started to learn, oh, this isn't like I'm playing the silent cartographer. This is more like playing the original, the Halo mission from Halo 1, which isn't bad, but definitely a different philosophy you'd have to take into consideration. You know, yeah, that's what I said about that.
Man, I had a really good question, or not question, a really good point that I wanted to follow that up on, and for the life of me, I can't remember it now. So we got Andrew. What have you got? What have you got? Cover me, dude.
Don't worry, I got you 6.
Thanks, buddy.
I guess. I mean, yeah. Obviously, I mean, you've got quite a sort of a background in Halo and playing it previously and stuff. Were there any other sort of games that I guess that you played growing up that encouraged you to want to sort of get into game and level design, or was Halo the main one?
Halo was the game that I played that made me want to be a level designer, primarily because of Forge.
Really?
Forge is something that I really enjoyed, yeah. And it made me feel like I was creating content for Halo, and you know, me being a little kid at the time, it's like, oh, I'm making things, I'm making experiences. I remember making racetracks and then levels, and even when Halo 5 came out and using that Forge editor before working at 343, like that is the thing that I kind of went back to Forge to kind of, that made me want to be something. I didn't know what I wanted to be. Because I didn't know what a level designer was. I didn't know what an environment artist was, but I did know that I wanted to work on games. And I felt like that was how you build games, is go on a controller and move things around with a little guilty spark, dude. But, you know, like that's kind of the thing that made me know that that's what I wanted to work on for a game. I did kind of drop that plan when I was in 6th grade. I remember playing Halo 3, really liking the Forge, and I was like, I want to make my own game using, you know, a game dev engine. And I remember looking online, it's like game development engine. I downloaded GameMaker, and I remember looking at it, and it was so confusing. It's like, what is an object? What is a script?
How do I switch monitor mode?
Yeah, exactly. How do I float around and place objects that were pre-made for me? And I
Where's
remember
my wall coliseum?
And honestly, like it was so intimidating that I immediately switched it off, and I decided to go into video, and I made a bunch of student films.
It scared you so hard that you changed career paths.
Exactly. Well, I was in middle school by this time, so I was like, I wasn't all in, you know. I didn't spend billions of dollars on school, but yeah, I did change. I was like, you know what, I give up. I'm done. And I like talking about that because it's like I feel like I gave up. Like I gave up so easily. I gave up my vision that quickly. And I decided I'm just going to talk about games, and I'm going to make videos based on games. And I enjoyed that. I did it for many years until I burnt myself out. You know, around my high school days, I did a lot of contract work for different companies around where I lived. And I got burnt out at one point. I was like, I never want to touch video editing again. And then, thankfully, one of my teachers, who was a very inspiring teacher, who really helped me push for like exploring what I wanted to do, pushed me towards a program that was near where I lived, and one of the programs there was game design. And that's when I got round 2 against Game Maker, and I made a short little experience. I finally learned how to do it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a game. And this is high school talk, so I apologize to everyone listening to this, but I made a game where you're a sock in an underwater floating island with a gun, and you're searching the underwater floating island for your missing pair. And that was it. It was just a short side-scrolling game, and that was my round 2 with Game Maker.
That's amazing.
What that really...
With no experience, you found a compelling narrative hook for why you have to do what you have to do as the sock.
Yeah, right? I was like, you lost your other pair. It made sense.
It just makes sense.
Honestly, I had a lot of fun with that. It made it really quickly, but like, I think that kind of sparked my interest again, because I played that game. I also played other games like BioShock and The Last of Us around that time.
Oh boy.
And those very deep, I really liked BioShock's deep game design philosophy for like sandbox type of game design, and I really loved the story of both of that game and The Last of Us. And I was like, okay, I think I want to work on games. And then I wanted to be a narrative designer, because I was like, I'm sure I was thinking that I was brilliant with that second sock pair idea, but no, I quickly learned I'm good at setting up situations, but I'm not good at like narrative, making a good narrative. I'm not good at that at all. So,
exploring
it
the
just became an
emotional
exploration.
The emotional depths of the sock losing its pair.
Yeah, that's easier than trying to figure out, I guess. Being a narrative designer, very hard work, very talented, those people. And I'm like, I don't want to do that because that's hard. And it basically just was an exploration on what the different job titles were and what I wanted to do. I went all over the place. I was a narrative designer, then I was just a generic gameplay designer, and I was like, okay, well, what type? Then I was a visual effects artist, and I was like, that's more technical. And then I found level design. I was like, oh, level designer. This is building the player experience, from a design perspective. And following that was environment art. It was basically the same thing, but from an artistic perspective. And I was like, this is what I want to do, because thinking about the player's experience and building for that, and thinking about what does the player see? What do they do? How do they go through the path? What are the different things that you can do on that path? And, how does the player get introduced to these mechanics, and how can you trick the players in ways that are really interesting? Like, those all were questions that I really enjoyed, and that's eventually what I went into.
That's a crazy story, dude. You were all over.
It's kind of wacky. Yeah, that's the story of somebody who doesn't know what they want to do, and then they find out. Because it kind of goes back to Forge, because it's like that's what you do as a forger. I mean, I think that's the core of what you could do in Forge, right? And that's kind of why I contribute that to why I want to make games, is that it helped me identify what I wanted to do. It just didn't tell me what it was. It's just, this is...
pushed you in the right direction.
Yeah, it made me think about it, and it wasn't until many, many, many years later that I actually learned what a level designer is, and then it unlocked something in me. I was like, oh, is that similar to what I did in Forge? Wait, I don't have to be a good artist? I don't need to know how to draw in order to do this? I'm in. Let's do this,
Just saw that there was no artwork involved and thought, you son of a bitch, I'm in.
Well, I mean, like art, like drawing. Like, I was like, I am a horrible drawer. I've tried, and I still try. Like, I study. I try to do digital painting now, but like I'm not good. And doing level design and even environment art to some degree is, you don't have to know how to draw. And to my brain back in the day, I thought that making games meant you had to draw. If you wanted to be an artist in a game, you need to know how to draw. But I didn't realize that designer was a job title, until it had to be explained to me. I was like, oh, but if I have to do levels, if I have to figure out what a level looks like, I have to draw, right? And they're like, no. You might have to draw 2D maps, which, isn't too bad. You have graph paper and you make little boxes and stuff. And that's essentially what you do as a level designer, is you make a bunch of boxes that tell people where to go. And
you mentioned something earlier that actually kind of piqued my interest for telling people where to go. You said all the little tricks that level designers do to like fool people into going where they want them to go or doing what they want them to do. As like just like a player, I noticed like I don't get lost in levels like I used to when I was much younger, and I think it's because like I've learned like those subconscious little level design things that you guys have to do to get my stupid ass like moving in the right direction. What are like stuff that maybe is a super obvious to you guys, but like not so obvious to us players, but it helps us get through missions?
Yellow paint. I'm just kidding. I don't know if you're watching the discussion on that.
Quick, after the answer, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts about yellow paint.
Sure. In all honesty, I think that it's honestly like it's a couple of things. And I think the important thing to think about is almost composition in photography or film as like the most obvious answer. Because yes, I know I said jokingly yellow paint. We can go into this a little bit more, but for some games it might be necessary. We can get into that. But in terms of like what you could do subconsciously without like a little bit more explicit instruction is just using simple tricks like lighting and shadow, positive space and negative space, rule of thirds, leading lines. Those things might not mean a lot to many people, but basically if you research composition, you'll see that in film and in pictures, everything is kind of built to guide your eye to something. So whether it's a winding path that leads your eye around up to a point of interest that's on the top right of a picture, or a bunch of arrows in the form of like the shape of doors and the shape of the floor could be abstracted into arrows that are pointing you towards a certain direction. Or using, if you think of like it's hard to explain without visuals, but if you think of like a long hallway with a T section at the end where it basically splits into two directions, but in one side there's a light hidden on the other, like the light that's turned on that's hidden behind the wall. And you think about what that would do to the lights and shadows, right? All of those kind of play a role in terms of telling you where to go. And you could be as subtle as you want or as explicit as you want. It really is up to you. But the important thing is to use whatever is necessary to get the job done. I remember watching listening to like a dev commentary for a Portal game, I think it was, or Half-Life. I don't remember what it was, but they found that, if you are making a level and somebody isn't finding where they need to go, you could always put an arrow, a big red arrow telling them where to go. And I believe they did that in Half-Life where somebody wasn't figuring out where to go and time crunch was a big issue. And they're like, let's put an arrow there, call it a day. And they did. And it worked out for them. But that might not be Half-Life 2. That might have been, they're introducing like the in the same level, I believe they're introducing like the fusion core, basically. So that's making me think Half-Life.
Somebody's going to know exactly what we're talking about, and they're going to be like, "How could you forget? It was obviously bubble, bubble, bubble."
Yeah, I don't know what I'm answering.
What do you think of yellow paint?
Yellow paint. Oh. I do think that to some degree yellow paint is important, but I think that yellow paint is overused. The problem isn't, in my opinion, that people use yellow paint or game developers use yellow paint. I think it's something.
We should clarify probably that for some of you who don't know what the yellow paint is. Kaleb, if you want to explain what the yellow paint controversy is for those who maybe don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember what game it was, but there was some game that released that used yellow paint on rock to show where you're supposed to jump to climb over something. It might have been. Do you remember the game?
It was like a build up of different games, and I think the straw that broke the camel's back in regards to like yellow paint just being in the weirdest place to signify that you have to go there was Resident Evil 4, the remake.
Oh yeah, I'm reading that because it was also in Final Fantasy VII and A Quiet Place. At least Google's telling me that.
Yeah, I remember in Far Cry, one of the Far Cries, 4 or 5, like I was out in the middle of the woods, like nothing for miles around me, and then there's like a cliff with yellow paint on the side.
That's the big problem that I think about it, because it's like, I don't think the issue is that there's yellow paint telling you where to go. I think it's not. It breaks your immersion, right? So I think for Uncharted 4 and the other Uncharted's maybe did something where they didn't use paint. They use, depending on the level, they used like erosion on the rocks that looked slightly whiter than the darker rock that it was on. And that makes more sense that you would see erosion there, right? It's fits the world, especially if it's in a Uncharted island that no one's been on before. But it's still gamey, right? It's still like, oh, this is where you go. And I think that's the biggest problem with most games nowadays, or a lot of games that have that issue, because I'll tell you right now, every single game has some version of yellow paint, but it's not, if it does its job well, it's not visible. And I think for
it's not necessarily
games, it's
yellow paint.
Yeah. Sometimes it's literally just a light flickering, or it's birds flying in a certain direction, telling you to look in a certain direction. Or in Halo, I mean, some of my favorite levels use it all the time. I'm thinking about, I think it's either the Ark or the Covenant, I don't remember, but like very commonly it would funnel you into, while you're driving a vehicle, it'd funnel you into a very tight cave, and then it would expand outward with epic music, the title screen popping up, and then the Forward Onto Dawn would teleport in with like a big sound, and it would be pointing towards where you're supposed to go. That's an example of using a big ship to point in a certain direction. You're looking at the direction it's pointing. It's like, oh, it's going there, I should go there. And usually it would do that right before the level would become non-linear. So something I've noticed in Halo, especially Halo 3, is that they would have like these open areas, and then they would funnel you into a linear area, and then it would very tight, and then it would go very open again, and then to guide you where you need to go, there would be something there. Either, yes, there would be a little bit of they'd have the little icon waypoint telling you where to go. But they would also have something else, whether it's, a ship in the sky, or it would be framed perfectly just as you exit the cavern. Sometimes it's a weenie, which is if you don't know what a weenie is, it's a trick used by Walt Disney to try to anchor you towards a location. So when Walt Disney was a good level designer as well. Apparently, like, there's so many level design tricks that Walt Disney invented, or at least popularized, which is the Weenie, which is still used to this day, which is basically in his Walt Disney parks. He wanted you always to see the main castle attraction thing. So it'd always be in view, and you'd always be able to be anchored towards that location. So if you end up in the large maze, which is Disneyland, you could always look up and find the weenie, and it would always be clear in view, and you could say, oh, I'm here, because it's always there.
That my mind is, like, my head is right now exploding at that. Amusement parks are really thoughtful. Like, I mean, even just based on something as simple as where trash cans are, I don't know how true this is, but you could kind of experience it. I haven't been in Walt Disney Park in a long time, but I remember it pretty well, which, he basically was like, oh, if I get this treat at this cart or this place, how long does it take me to finish it before there's a trash can? And he'd say he'd take it from the stand, he'd eat the treat walking around, and then he'd finish it and say, put a trash can there, and stuff like that. Just very thoughtful, like trying to make the experience as good as possible by not making you think about things that you have to do, but enjoying the place that you're in. And they do that with tricks. They do it with, level design tricks, basically having a winding path around certain things, but you always know exactly where you are. Little points of interest, which in this instance was the trash can. Those are the only two examples I could think of off the top of my head for Walt Disney, but that's kind of the two things that stick out to me from what I heard. But there's always something to learn. And I remember when I was studying at that school about game design, I remember they took us to IKEA,
And I remember thinking, that's a weird place to take us, is IKEA. I don't know if you've ever been inside of an IKEA, but it's very well designed to the point where it's confusing and it forces you to see everything, but there's also so many different shortcuts. And we used it as an example of Swiss cheese level design, which I used extensively when working on Halo Infinite, which is basically the idea that there's a bunch of paths that you could take, but you'll always end up in the same place. And there's always a shortcut if you really want to. So, for instance, in IKEA, there's the one main path that winds all across the store before you get to the end. But if you want to cut to a certain point, there's a bunch of shortcuts that you can take that aren't really well lit. They're usually hidden. And if you take those shortcuts, you'll end up at the end in like a quarter of the time, you know?
You're saying IKEA hides its speed run tricks really well.
Yeah, I'll wedge my Warthog through some of the hallways like the silent cartographer.
Jamming a Warthog into an IKEA?
Yeah, I'm a Halo fan. How do you know?
It's like that one IKEA salesperson who comes out.
Honey, we got to do the grenade jump. Do the grenade jump. It'll get us to the kitchen.
But no, because think about it, though, because all the IKEA employees wear yellow, right? They're all elite zealots. It makes sense.
Oh, my God.
I'm not trying to imply anything, I should say.
No, we should clarify. He's joking. Also, he's in Australia, so if you want to do something, you can't.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I've never, yeah, you're totally right. Like, it's funny to say out loud that Walt Disney would be a awesome Halo level designer, but like, you're totally right about.
I think that's.
Yep.
That's like the best experiences, though, is like, think about every good experience you have, even in real life. Like, that's kind of the idea, right? It's like you have to think about the player's experience or the user's experience or the attraction goer's experience, whatever you'd call it. But like, even like stores, right? Well done stores, well done amusements, well done parks, all can be wonderful experiences if you design them right, or they could be awful experiences. Plus, it encourages you to touch grass, which is something I don't often do.
Dang, to make games, you have to have a good understanding of the real world.
You have to think about how people think, and you have to think about, you know, how if somebody's lost, you know, in real life, you can't just paint yellow paint everywhere unless you're like OSHA and you put yellow paint everywhere. But if you are in a park. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say the real world, unfortunately, can use a lot of lazy artistic cheats in the form of literal direction signs.
If you want to have a great experience in real life, don't use a map, don't use Google Maps, don't use arrows. Just figure out how to get from point A to point B without any arrows or directions or anything like that. Sometimes that's easier said than done. Sometimes, you know,
I used off playthrough of real life.
Blind Skull be like,
yeah. I mean, honestly, like that's something that we thought about when designing Halo Infinite campaign was like, okay, well, how does a player figure out how to get from point A to point B? What if they don't have a waypoint? You know, because you of course want to rely on waypoints and you want to use all the tools at the player's disposal, but also what if they don't have it? And you know, using compositional tricks is also important, but also it's like, okay, well, how do you get from point A to point B? And also, how do you get from point A to point B with different vehicles, with different weapons, with different play styles? So thinking about that, you know, I think that the lead designer on the campaign had a design goal they told me one time, which honestly I'm not really sure I agree with, but it still I think worked for what he was trying to do, which was basically he wanted, if you are on a vehicle, it should take you the same amount of time to get from point A to point B as it takes you on foot. I have my own opinions on that, but it still kind of makes you think about, okay, if you're trying to think about how, like the Swiss cheese level design of IKEA, and also, you know, the different spaces that you can access as a player, then you can access in a tank or a car or something like that. And then also, how can you utilize the terrain to kind of make certain things easier or harder? Of course, Graphook breaks all of that, but you know, that's a different thing.
I told Andrew quite a few months ago now, I think. I recently did a playthrough of Halo Infinite after not touching the game for a very long time. I basically did a self-imposed no grappling hook and no spawning in vehicles at the fobs. I have to just use what I stumble across. And I noticed that Halo Infinite's
teleport?
campaign also no fast travel.
Okay, yeah, that breaks a lot of stuff too.
I noticed that you can do it. And the campaign thankfully does a really good job of always pointing me in the right direction after a big story cinematic set piece. Like I think of Chaklock's tower. After you beat up Chaklock and then the thing opens and then you can leave, there's immediately like the sun is setting in the direction that you need to go, and there's a bridge that is opening right in front of you, and you fight your way across it, you climb up a hill, and then way off in the distance is the dig site thing that you're supposed to be making your way towards. And it's like that for the whole campaign. Like after you leave a cinematic set piece, it's always facing you in the direction. I was able to beat the campaign without ever opening up my map.
Yeah, like that was something that, I mean, we didn't know if there was going to be a map, and we also didn't know until much later in development than I think we were pretty close to content lock before we found out that grapple shot was a permanent upgrade, because there was a lot of discussion on whether it would and basically it was our idea to just pretend for now that it would just not be there, because we didn't know if it was going to be an equipment that you'd pick up or if it was something that was permanently on you. So everything had to work as if it didn't. So I was saying about Fortune Squad before. Fortune Squad, and I could send you guys what it looks like just to kind of show you like what I'm talking about, because I'm just talking just about something that may not make any sense. But basically, Fortune Squad was designed as a platforming level back when we didn't know you could just grapple to the end and call it a day. What are the gaps between point A to point B, and what would be the punishment? I mean, there was a lot of discussion about that. Eventually we said there's not really big punishment, you just try again, whatever. But also, what is the experience if you have a grapple shot or not? Because we didn't know if you would have a grapple shot. So a lot of effort was put into you actually going through everything there. And there was multiple pathways. There was multiple places for you to go. Multiple different stories depending on which direction you came from. And watching a playthrough of someone just taking a wasp and dropping on top, or just grappling all the way to the top, doing it and then leaving, kind of hurts my soul a little bit. But I mean, that's what the game allows you to do. So it's like, cool.
Can I say something bold?
But yeah, like that's just sure. Go ahead.
I kind of wish that I really wish that the grappling hook wasn't an infinite equipment that you had at all times.
I could say that we've had a lot of discussions about the grapple hook and its intent, and I know that a lot of people found it to be the most exhilarating part of the campaign and the multiplayer. I can agree that the multiplayer, it does add quite a bit, and I do enjoy it in multiplayer. I'm not a huge multiplayer guy, but I do see the value of that as a sandbox item, like the ability to grapple different things and have that affect other items in the level, I think is great. But in campaign, it's not used as that. It's used as an excuse for you to not use anything else in the game. You don't need to use vehicles, because using other vehicles is frustrating because it's slower than the grapple hook, and enemies can stall it with their electricity beam thing. I forget what it's called, but the electric gun. Why get in the Warthog when you could just grapple to the end? Why would you get a tank if a grapple shot is a lot more powerful than a big gun? If you could just end up behind enemies or something like that, or just instantly, grapple to a vehicle and take it over. As a design theory thing, gamers will never do the thing that's the most fun. They'll do the thing that's most convenient most of the time. And I think that Halo Infinite, for some people, and I'll say myself included, the grapple hook ruins the fun because it is more powerful than any weapon or any vehicle, and you could just blitz through the whole game. And for most people, that's what they will do. They will never experience, and also that's the other thing, they'll never experience the levels themselves. If you think about, if you put grapple shot into any Halo campaign, you'll never experience the storytelling. You'll never experience the cinematography. You'll never
bye level design.
Yeah, like I That's me too. Like, if I want to make myself obsolete, we'll make every game with a grapple shot because I don't have to do my job anymore. I'll just have to put something up top, just grapple to the top. There you go. My job's done.
I heard someone say that that's part of why, like, Superman games, like, you'd think Superman would be an awesome character to design a game for, but that's partially why there are not a lot of Superman games and not a lot of good Superman games, because his whole thing is he can ignore level design.
Yeah, it's like you're the fun is ignoring the level, which honestly for some people that could be really fun. And I think that the experience of flying through a level really fast is a great experience. But then all of the effort, like there's a lot of effort in meticulous detail on making sure that the terrain was very high quality with the tools that we had available and the time we had available. The little storytelling beats with all of the little, set dressing and, the attention to detail on some of the textures. And I'm not going to go into every little thing but there's so much detail put into all of those things. Why would we do that if you could just grapple to the end? It's just make it like a car game where there's no detail.
In my blind playthrough, like no map, no grappling hook or anything, I stumbled across this place in the open world. It was on the side of the ring near the tower. It was like a campfire and some like roast, like those freaking bird things that are like running around. Like a bunch of them are roasting on the fire. And there's a bunch of marine gear and UNSC stuff and sleeping bags, but none of the Marines are there. There's also a lot of like brute helmets and stuff. And there's this like perch way up. There was like a radio there, almost like somebody was up there doing lookout for the guys down below that were eating the poor bird things. And it looked like they got attacked by brutes and had to retreat. And then the brutes were like, what's this they're doing? Oh, they're roasting those birds. Let's put down our helmets and have some of it. And it was just like all of that with a couple of... And I had never noticed that in the open world until I did this playthrough without just speeding through it as Spider-Man grappling hooking through the trees.
Yeah, like that's the big thing, because I think I know who made that. Those are the moments that are really special, in my opinion. And those are the things that just make your imagination go wild of like, why is this here? And because there is thought put into why that's there. It's not just a random, hey, let's just put this here for no reason. There is thought put into it, and there's a reason for it.
Something that I wish the Halo Infinite campaign did more of, I guess. Like, as kind of like a side effect of the grappling hook, you're the most powerful force in any given firefight. You're the most mobile. You're kind of all over the map. Even elevation is kind of trivial. And in the older Halo games, something that was like a lot of fun is that you were always almost the same pace as the Marines around you. Like they had the same jump height as you. They had the same walk speed as you, mostly the same, because I know it can't be exactly the same. And so it always kind of felt like you were fighting alongside a squad, and they were always either keeping pace with you or they were leading you and you were following them. And as Halo has kind of gotten faster and faster and more vertical and like, thruster pack, grappling hook, jetpack, like all of these different armor abilities or gadgets and stuff, I've noticed that Halo hasn't been quite as good at having that fantasy, of like storming a Covenant blockade with a squad of Marines or, running along the side of a cliff with your snipers. Like, you don't really have that fantasy anymore.
Yeah, and that's not from a lack of trying. I could say that there's plenty of areas in the open world that tried to do that. I mean, every level, every area we created, we tried to have some sort of player fantasy that it was based on. And we tried to theme it in that way. But you can't really do that, not just with Marines, with everything. Like, even if there was no combat whatsoever, or no enemies, or no allies, just some sort of theme. For instance, like there's one area that I worked on that was I don't know if it has enemies now. Actually, it might be an HVT. I don't remember, but like there's an area that I designed that was where you unlocked the energy sword back in the day, and it was there's an area. There's like a pillar in the middle of the open world. It was a large pillar, and there's like two banished crates that fell from the mothership that they missed, and one of them like crashed out and went off the side, and you can see it on the floor, far down below, on some hexagons. But then there's another one that is on the edge of the tower, and and if you go inside of it, you can look down and see the entire, like the drop with the entire second half of like the open world section. I think that's where you fight a HVT now, but at one point it was like the idea is that you would go there and there isn't really there. And what I mean by theming is that there's a reason for everything to be there, and it's how you navigate it changes. So you would have to get there by Banshee or Wasp because it's too high up and too far away.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then once you get there, you would have to like navigate around up to like the place where it's like teetering on the edge, and there's like a hidden Forerunner cave somewhere around there. But the idea is that you'd go into the teetering edge bit and get like the goodie, and then like at that point you'd have enemies come in and teach you how to use the energy sword. So basically, you would have this large open area saying, "Hey, this is not the best place to use the energy sword. You got to use in this area where it's more close quarters and you have a lot of cover." So basically fulfilling the fantasy of like teaching the player how to use something or use the energy sword. But even just areas where like there's a crashed pelican, not crashed pelican. I don't think we have any of those. Maybe we do, but a crashed bumblebee is what it was. And like the dead Marines around it and the things that you'd find about around it. You know, we tried to give some sort of reason for every area of the open world that we thought the player would like frequent in their travels. But I think that's yeah. I mean, I really like that, but it's just lost. You know, it's lost when you're incentivized to ignore it. And I think thankfully a lot of people kind of do see it, and I think it's great. And I'm not one to say, oh, the players have to experience it this way. But I think that your job as a designer is to try to dictate how players experience something, because something that the old Halo games did very masterfully is they make you feel like you're free and open, but they were incredibly linear. They're incredibly restricting, even though they felt open. And that's a great job of a level designer, is to make a very cinematic linear experience feel open. And I don't think cinematic and open tie together very well, especially if you have full control over the pace.
There's a YouTuber that I really, really like. His name is Noah Gervais, and he used the term outdoorador to describe that stuff, that like you don't notice you're still in a corridor because you got the feeling of being outside and free. You're in an outdoorador.
Yeah, the old Halo 1 level is a master that had large open areas, then it would funnel you into, kind of how I was explaining earlier, it's a big open area that would funnel you into a spot when it wanted to show you something. And then after it showed you, like the first time it funneled you was showing you the Halo ring. And that feeling of being crammed in a corridor and then crammed in the Bumblebee and then seeing the Halo ring on the planet, people felt like you were so open because it immediately sprawled outward. There was really only two places you could go, but it felt massive because of like that shot, right? And then you could go anywhere you wanted until it funneled you into like a canyon, because it wanted to show you the surviving Marines as the Phantom or whatever they used to call them flew away, right? Because it wanted to show you something, and then it would open up again, and then it would funnel you again when it wanted to show you the bridge.
Yeah,
I lost connection. Whoops. But it would funnel you into the cave, and then it would open up again when you saw the bridge, and then it would let you play around until you figured it out. So like that's the thing that I really liked about the old Halo design methodology, is that it would funnel you only when it needed to show you the playground, and then it would let you loose, and you're like, okay, have fun with this player fantasy that we've set up for you. But it was still structured. And then after you were done, it was like, okay, I'm done here, I'm going to go again. It would funnel you again to the next thing. And that's how you could have such varied experiences, is that it was very tightly controlled. In Halo Infinite, if I don't want to fight somebody, I could just leave. You know, that's I'm more powerful than every other enemy. And you were saying something before about Marines keeping pace. I mean, even the enemies couldn't keep pace, even the boss fights. You know, every the Master Chief is more powerful than the bosses that you fight. So there's not really much tension there. I think unless even if you're playing on a really hard difficulty, you can typically escape.
Andrew.
Yes, sorry, I've been very quiet and listening quite intently because it's just all really interesting stuff. And
yeah, we made the joke before recording. Spongy.
Yes, I am sponging, just sucking in all the information. But I think that like Infinite being the latest game out, the incumbent game, as it were, you don't often hear too much about it in terms of like development stories, aside from hearsay and stuff. Whereas getting this like directly is just like really interesting.
I'll quickly say too that this is this is my personal experience. 343 is a massive company that has thousands of contractors, external vendors, employees, directors. Like there's so many people who work there that all have different stories, and I think that mine is just one of many, and a fairly everybody you might talk to, everyone has their own feelings and ideas there, and I think that working there was wonderful. Definitely a highlight of my career.
So I have a question actually for you that I think could be a lot of fun, because I think that there's a lot of people that are it's in the Halo community. We know about something that was going to be in the Halo Infinite campaign, but was cut.
Here we go.
Here we go. I've been like sitting on this.
Here we go. This is it.
Yeah. I was trying to wait for a good segue. I couldn't find one. So there, in the Discord recently, 343 finally acknowledged its existence after being this open secret. There's a monster called the Crusher that was supposed to be the heavy unit, or like heavy enemy type like thing for the campaign, that doesn't exist anymore. Do you know anything about that thing?
Yeah, I worked on one of the caves that it was going to be in. I worked on several other points of interest that were cut, after, I'm sure you heard about the big cut that they made at one point of like a big portion of the campaign. A little bit misleading the way that they announced that, but
they make it seem like the game was finished completely, and then they just hacked off 2/3 of it.
Yeah,
that's the way people on the internet make it seem.
Yeah, I've also heard that it's like 2/3 of the story was cut. I could tell you right now there wasn't much of a story that was there.
Can you say that very clearly and loudly for everybody listening, that no 2/3 of the story was not cut?
That's the big thing that that's the big thing that I really didn't like about like the reporting of it, because like it wasn't quite clear. 2/3 of the open world was cut, but that doesn't mean that there was much content in the open world, which makes me sad because I lost a lot of work. But honestly, it was for the better, because before that point, I only knew the story that happened with Cortana working on the campaign. Everything else was just us building a world with things to happen inside of it. But there wasn't like a through line. There wasn't like the chief does this, then this, then this, then this, then this. And then it came in
like a golden path
at one point, and then there was a very clear, hey, this is where you go, this is how it's done. Before then, it was just certain parts of the open world that would open at certain points. So I won't go too much into that, but I will say that back to the Crusher.
He's like Bigfoot to like some of us. Like you were the closest. Tell us, what was it like?
Well, that's another thing, is like it's such a big game that like it was just something that I knew existed and I knew people were working on. And then eventually I was asked to make a level for it. And I knew that it was some creature that I think was native to Zeta Halo. Maybe that's not the case. I don't know. But it basically was an enemy that would be would either be just wild and just kind of be there. And that's what the cave was. The cave was meant to be an arena for, and the cave is still there today. There's like a sinkhole with a ring in it, right next to like the Forerunner North Tower. Yeah, that whole area I was responsible for between Forerunner North, and the area between Forerunner North in the sequence level and Riven's Gate. I did a lot of work on, and that cave had a lot of work to put into it. It was a lot of moving parts. Something that turned that started out to be a 2-day project turned into several months. It was insane. But yeah, I was working on it, and they thought it would be a good place to put the crusher. It was there, and it could either just be wild, or it was like captured by the banished. Like there was a whole mechanic that was there where, Marines or where the crusher could be captured by the banished and freed if you allowed them. So, like I believe there was one time where there was like jail cells that that Marines could be in, and then they would be picked up by a phantom and flown to wherever you want them to go. Similarly, like the crushers would be in shackles, and if you free them from those shackles, they'll attack both you and the banished.
Like the tigers in Far Cry?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between Far Cry and Halo Infinite, and I'd say that's one of them. And yeah, that's basically all I knew about them before they were cut. I did play, I did have to play test the cave with them, and you might see that. So like if you've played Halo Infinite, you could see that there's a big cave with just a small enemy squad in there, and it might feel like it's too big. Like the cave is just too massive for the type of combat encounter that you have. And that's intentional, because the crusher would leap. They would leap towards you great distances, and you had I designed that cave to be able to grapple shot around, like you needed to be grapple shot up to like another area, and then it would leap and try to attack you. So this small sinkhole that I was trying to create turned out to be this massive cave, because we needed to make sure that the crusher could leap without getting stuck in geometry and stuff.
It's a big cave for a big boy, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think there's like this hidden area to the side of it, which is where he used to sleep. But now there's just enemies there.
You made a sleeping spot for him?
Yeah, like I didn't know if he could sleep. So like there's a lot of things that happen in the open world, like areas in the open world that are meant for something that didn't exist. So like say for instance, there's one, I don't remember the name of the squad, but there was one area on the edge of the ring that I created that was meant to be like an executioner's spot, where basically there's Marines that were caught, and this brute was literally one by one just going to kick them off the ring, and you were supposed to go and save them before they all were kicked off the ring. But of course that's not very PG or whatever, and also that requires animation support, that requires engineering support. And these Marines were built to be very, very low maintenance, very little artistic support, very little design support, almost no engineering support. It's meant to be just plug in and play. So yeah, that was cut. We didn't actually do that, but there's a lot of things that were designed, that were areas that were designed for something that just had to be turned into something else. That's one example. Another example is with the crusher, where there's like right in the sinkhole, there's the ring, but if you go a little bit to the right, or wherever that was, I think that's east, you'll see that there's a little cubby hole. What do you call it? Cul-de-sac, whatever you would call it. And that was where he was going to sleep. So I don't know. It was like if the player went down, they would. They'd
suburbs.
I don't know. He just wants to live a chill life. I don't know. You just come in and invade his property, and he gets mad.
The crusher has a mailbox.
Well, that's it. The ring was his mailbox, and you mess with the mailbox, and he doesn't really care. But then when you go wake him up, then that's when he's mad.
Oh my god.
So then we just put a bunch of boxes there for him to push around, and then that's when the fight happened. But yeah, then he was cut at some point.
What would he do if, like, oh man, like my mind is going crazy. Like I can see it now in my mind moving around. What would happen if, like, you were in a place that he couldn't get to, that he couldn't leap to? Would he just like yell at you?
He would do pretty much what every character in the open world would do, and just kind of shoot at you and yell insults.
Shoot. Did he have a gun?
No, he'd just leap at you. And then if he couldn't get to you, like, I'll tell you that it's good that he was cut. Like, that's what I'll say. Okay. I'm sure with the proper time, our team would be like the team at 343 would be able to figure it out. But there wasn't a scenario where enhanced the player experience, I'll say. And that's kind of the thing with game design in general, right? It's not a bad thing. It's not like a this they didn't do a good job. I don't want to make it seem like that impression, but it's one of those things where it's like you have to make a decision. It's going to cost you. You have this problem in front of you, and you say, "Oh, this isn't fun right now." Do you spend the time and money and resources to put everyone on that, or do you instead spend those resources elsewhere? And I think, in my opinion, I think they spent those resources elsewhere in a good way, because the Crusher didn't do anything except be in the open world. And it was the only wildlife, quote unquote, that was hostile. And it just didn't feel like it fit. It just kind of felt like it was its own thing. So, I mean,
he was just a guy in
I think they made the right decision. Yeah, I mean, and then there was other ones that were open. I don't remember exactly where, but it was meant to be a lot more common, either just sleeping in the open world or captured by Banished.
He has a tail, the Crusher. Did he like wrap up like a small dog? You know how they like turn into croissants when they're sleeping to be cozy? Is that what the Crusher would do to sleep?
I'll be honest, I don't remember. I think that they didn't sleep, but they were meant to sleep. Like they were just standing there. I don't think there was any sort of unique animation for sleeping. But I don't remember. This is one of those things where it was so long ago, I don't quite remember exactly what it looked like. I have my memory, but it might be a little bit fuzzy.
You're like the old fisherman, the old fisherman being interviewed about the time he sighted Bigfoot 8 years ago. It's like, oh, yeah, my memory's foggy.
Yeah, that's the weird thing about this is that I remember certain things very vividly about that, but a lot of things it's like, oh well, I kind of remember it. I can envision it in my head, but it's not like I could have some facts slightly wrong about that. But I know, like, definitely that was the spot for the Crusher. I do know that it would leap around. I don't think it was kind of janky, I remember, but I don't remember exactly how. I remember that you would get to places it couldn't get to and stuff like
a cat?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, you just really want this bloody great 10-foot tall horned beast to be like some domesticated house animal.
I want them to make a plushie of the Crusher.
You're like saying like this is where he sleeps. This is his cave. Like now you're saying he's like getting places where he shouldn't. Like hey, you get down from there. You know the rules. No being up on the bookshelf. And it's broad, like the Crusher on a bookshelf.
Hey, that's the job of a level designer. When you tell enemies to go a certain spot and they don't do it, then they need to be, you have to discipline them and say no, and then you cut off their nav mesh, and then they have to find somewhere else to go.
Oh,
are there any, moving away from the Crusher, are there any other like fun like just like little things like that where it was like, man, this would have been pretty cool, but unfortunately we had to cut it for the health of the game? Anything you can talk about, at least? Because I know there's stuff floating around, like renders, concept art of like fish.
They cut the fish?
Yeah.
Wait, really? I placed fish a bunch of places. Okay. Well, that's sad. Yeah, there was fish. I guess they don't anymore. The area on the top left of the map, I remember we talked about it being Blood Gulch at one point. And I really wanted to work on it. I was like, please let me do that. And I was told a solid no. So that was that.
Oh, man.
But I guess now it's just like a hologram now. And I think, there was, we created a lot of...
Blood Gulch is a hologram?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a Blood Gulch hologram somewhere in the open world.
There's
one
an
of
Easter egg. I think you go into like a cave or something, or you fall down some rock face and there's like a banished hologram desk sort of thing that's got a hologram of Blood Gulch on it. Yeah.
That's so crazy.
If they built that, I really wanted to work on it. I was so passionate about Blood Gulch back then. I was like, yeah, let me do this. It was just an artist's job. They were like, what is a designer going to do? I could say that a lot of my work that I was really proud of didn't make it, but I mean, it's not like it's more of what the open world was. Like when people say that 2/3 of the game was cut, really, like, you just kind of like imagine the game as it is, but like more of it. That's kind of what was cut.
there wasn't a super secret boss fight with mendicant bias, and then a guardian came out of nowhere, and then you finished the fight against Cortana, and all of that was cut.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
There we go. We basically got the equivalent of
That's a
sorry,
joke, by the
Germs
way.
is classified.
That's a joke. Please don't hunt me down, Microsoft. I'm scared of your legal team.
I think we're reaching the conclusion here. I wish we could literally talk for 4 hours.
Part 2.
Yeah. Oh man, dude, can we have you back?
Part 2, but this time we're playing Halo Infinite while we talk.
Hey, that's not a bad idea.
A special episode of Warthog Radio, a
It'd be cool to
playthrough.
just kind of like go around the open world and just you can like point parts out like, oh yeah, I did that, and just give us a little spiel about like what went into it and stuff.
Oh my god, yeah.
I enjoy playing through parts sometimes, like Halo Infinite, just walking around, or we talked about New World and stuff like that, like those worlds, just kind of playing around, walking around, it's relaxing. And then I get shot, and then I try to, that's a useful thing for grapple shots. If I don't want to fight anybody, I'll just grapple shot away and continue my time.
And then a grunt yells something mean at you.
Yeah.
Dude, Kaleb, it was a pleasure having you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you very much for coming on. I think we both learnt an awful lot today. So yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah, sorry you couldn't ask too many questions. I talk too much. I'm sorry.
No, please. That's like talking too much is the best thing, the best problem to have when you're on a podcast and you're the guest. Like that's perfect.
Yeah, I guess the alternative is not talking at all, and that wouldn't be a fun podcast, I'm sure.
Well, then we wouldn't know so much about the Crusher.
Oh, I can see it in me mind's eye. It had a big long tail that it used to curl up and to look like a croissant when it was sleeping.
Its bed was in that corner.
And it ate very large fish.
It can't eat kibble, so I have to cook all its meals for it. It's got a sensitive tummy.
You're giving me more stuff to put on my art station for the part where the Crusher Cave is there. It'd be making up all this fan content now. Like, oh, this is what it's having here. This is where the stove used to be.
Used to be Atriox's pet, but then Eshram inherited it, and he doesn't like him very much.
He just had his 8th birthday.
How long does a Crusher live for?
Fucked if I know.